start. Right, we're live on YouTube. I'm just going to start us on Facebook.
Right, shall I try and post that Facebook link around a few places?
Yeah, man. You go spammy, spam.
Hello. Can you hear us?
Hello to the interworlds.
Yeah. Hello, Facebook.
Right, hang on. How do I actually fucking share this thing?
You should share it as a post.
See if you hear loud popping noises again, lads. That's the
light blowing up again.
That's the light blowing up again.
Kaboom!
That was brilliant last time.
It stunk as well. The place absolutely stunk out. Like that kind of burnt electrical sort of smell.
That's never pleasant.
Yeah. With some sort of control capacitors in the actual thing, because the flash still works, funnily enough, even though I cut out all those capacitors. So I think it's obviously to do with the control. Don't need them.
Right.
So that's why I've got this sexy soft light all over me.
Okay, that's on.
Have you spammed it around the entire world now, Trick?
I'm in the process of doing that.
Fair enough.
Bear with.
No drama, mate. No drama.
No drama, llama.
This is a 2 or 3 light. Should I
say? It's coming
up
with live subtitles on the thing. If you got it muted, that's pretty cool.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Can it do pure Scots like? Aye.
Probably not.
You can.
No, Dan. I'm recording the rugby.
It's not doing a bad job, to be fair. Actually,
that's fair play then.
Oh no, it's gone a bit gobbledygook now.
Yeah. Let's try and break it.
Oh, we've got 4 people. We've got 6 people watching us on Facebook.
Welcome.
Yeah, bear with us, Facebook viewers. We're still setting a few things up here, but we'll get going soon, hopefully.
Yeah, chill your boots.
Yep, we're just warming up.
So Andy's currently got the Rona.
Well, I've got a cold. I don't think it's the Rona.
It's the Rona.
Yeah. Because a few people, so my mum and dad have got it, Sarah's got it, I've got it, and we've all been testing negative, so there's a pretty bad cold going about in Scotland, definitely at the minute.
Wow.
The Scottish cold.
Hey, it's brutal.
Evening, Adam. He's on Facebook, Mr. Adam Broad. Hello, mate.
Hey up.
Evening. Right, that's as much spamming as I can be asked to do for now. So
okay, that works. Right, shall we 3, 2, 1 and into Audacity? Is everyone ready?
Are we doing? If you set up, is YouTube live?
Yeah, YouTube's been live for a while.
All right, okay, cool.
Mate, you should see the control screens I've got.
I believe it.
It's phenomenal. Okay, Audacity, are we ready?
Yeah, why not?
Yep.
So it's 3, 2, 1, then go. Okay.
Do we know what episode this is?
Episode 41. Who's doing the intro?
I can do it if you want.
Hey.
All right, you do it, Trick. Okay, gentlemen. 3, 2, 1, click.
Right. Everything working okay?
I'm all good, mate.
We're all good. Should we crack on then?
Let's
Did
do
it.
it.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to episode 41 of the Hop Edition. And tonight we are going to be looking into some homebrew myths. So a few complete untruths, half-truths, maybe some other things that are debatable either way. But a few things that are basically we consider to be sort of homebrew myths in terms of either being not quite accurate or just stuff that's outright nonsense. So let's dive into it and see what we come up with.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll have a few arguments anyway, that's for sure.
Oh, I can almost tell you the points where we're going to have the argument.
There's a few controversial ones in there, I must admit.
Yeah.
So, but that's all part of the fun. So
Exactly.
anyway, let's kick it off as we usually do with the what are you drinking round? And Chris,
Aye.
what are you on? What are
Well,
you on the bevies?
I have this little gem which you can see. I've got
pretty clear.
I've got
Clarity
pretty good
is
clarity
okay.
on that one. This is the Northern Monkey.
Oh, Chris, yes.
I have to admit,
Fuck you, Northern Monkey.
I have become quite addicted to this beer.
Yes.
All right. So I normally when I come down to the shed, I've got my 5 taps, and I'll normally evenly spread myself out. Drink a few.
It's a good one when it gets hammered.
I like this one. I like that one. I'll spread it out. And I thought with the quality of the IPL that I produced the last time, I would literally be bending that keg over.
Mm-hmm.
But no, the monkey's getting absolutely banged.
Hammered.
Yeah. Literally
Slamming
every
the
time
monkey.
I come down, I am cracking the monkey every time I come down the shed, and I'm not needing baby wipes.
No, I was gonna say it was the baby wipes, but
The monkey's getting a good old spanking in that shed, isn't it?
I'll tell you, the fruity flavors in this, they've really come out. It's mostly blackberry.
oh, amazing.
It's the best beer name for innuendos ever. Yes,
It's a good one.
And
it's
that Northern Monkey.
I'm telling you. You wait until I send you a bottle of this, boys, because this is a banger.
I'll look forward to it, Chris.
Well, I've just got to rebuild one more line on the kegerator and
Why
get
are you rebuilding your lines, by the way?
because they were annoying me and I was getting a teeny bit of fobbing.
Because he's a fidget and he just has to change
teeny
stuff all
bit.
the time.
Hey,
That's
he was getting a teeny bit of fob, and it was more like it was just pouring tons of foam.
I think
I think that's your shitty.
And Andy
Andy.
might have criticised the fobbing a little bit last time we was around.
I did
yours.
slightly.
It's funny, but I don't have any issues. What can I say?
That's the head. You have to put it under to actually get it to.
Well,
to
be fair, I think Andy did have his glass about a foot underneath the tap and was just like fucking dropping it straight in under gravity.
That's how it is at high road.
What's going on here? This is not how it's supposed to
Not a
work.
fucking air horn, Andy. No, it's a beautiful beer, and as soon as I get this next line rebuilt and I get the saison on there, the raspberry and hibiscus saison, I'll be carving that up, giving it a week, and then I'll be sending out a beer mail. So probably start of the Easter holidays, you guys will start getting beer mail.
Who is this guy? Tricky.
I know.
Tricky.
I've got labels and everything.
More than one beer mail in a year.
I know.
What?
I'm not going to be
Who are you?
brewing
What have you
again
done with
until
Chris?
May. I know. I'm not
He's
going to
been
be brewing again until May, so I don't know what's going off here. But yeah, I figured you guys all deserve to try this one because this is a true banger. This it's really nice.
Chris,
Just do the free plastic bottles though this time, so you don't have to like pay about £3,000 in postage.
Oh no, literally 2. That's all you're having.
Just the 2. Okay.
And I don't give a shit about you signing for
Let's
it.
not get carried away.
Yeah, just second class, whatever.
That's the one. That's the one.
Amazing.
It's a beautiful beer though. Very, very nice.
It's the next on my list. I don't think I'll be doing the same recipe as yours, Chris, but it's a Bramlin Cross lager as well that I'm planning.
Everyone's all over the English hopped lagers at the minute.
Yeah, that was,
It's Luke's fault.
Luke.
Yeah, Southern Jesse has started the craze, hasn't it?
Because I had the Hellas one, Tricky, that you did. I had that on tap, and Luke sent me the Southern Jesse, and there was just something about that softness and the fruitiness that came through in the lager that was just very, very good.
Yeah, it's cracking.
Yeah.
I have to say, Luke came up with a banger there. He really did.
I remember Luke mentioning at the time because he'd tried an EKG Pilsner from a brewery somewhere, and he was just like, "Oh, this is dynamite! I need to do it," sort of thing. And it's just he's came up with his recipe, and it's just been absolutely super duper well received. I think is the best way to put it.
Hey,
So
what
yeah,
can I say? It's a bloody
all
good
loving
beer.
it. Yeah, it was. Oh, yep, very very good.
Anyway, we've gone off on a mad tangent there already, just through one beer. So, Andy, what are you drinking?
I've got my IPL, so this is like Chris as well. If I go to my kegerator at the minute, what gets spanked is this. This is V2 of the IPL, and it was originally it was me and Chris was talking about how to obviously pull together an IPL, and I went with half the amount of hops that he suggested.
It's a shame you didn't brew it to Chris's recipe, because then you could have been spanking Chris's nipple.
Welcome to Innuendo Bingo on the Hop Edition tonight.
But yeah, the IPL is insane. It's just this lovely tangerine citrus. The first time I did it with Citra Amarillo, and then this time I've added Simcoe into the mix as well, just to see what that brings. So
Cat piss. That's
Sounds
what it
good.
brings.
it just brings
cat
that.
piss.
It just brings a little bit more funk,
a bit of dank, bit
a
of
little
resin.
bit dank, a little bit resin, and a little bit of pine.
A little bit of sulphurous urine. Yeah.
I can see you're still not a convert to Simcoe, Chris.
Nah, not at all.
No, but it just works so well. Do you know one of those beers that you come up with, and you just go yes, and you just want to that is on, like, that is forever going to now be on the rebrew.
Yeah.
So if I've got an IPL, that is the IPL sort of basis sort of thing, and then just tweak it from there. So
That's
it's
what you
one
want,
of
though,
those.
isn't it?
Yeah.
It's always
Yeah.
nice when you come up with a beer that you always want to be on tap.
And you know it's good because it just gets absolutely hammered as well.
Oh, yeah.
So that's what I'm drinking. Tricky. What about you?
Excuse me. So I'm on a traditionally hopped Hellas. Well, sort of traditionally. There's a bit of SARS in there, which makes it slightly. It's your high road Hellas recipe, Andy.
It's just
the
SARS was
35-point
because I love it.
lager, as I should call it from
Yeah.
now on. Which has now slightly been spoiled for me, because I know that Owen's one is better, first of all,
Rubbish.
and now once you've had like judges' feedback on a beer, you just like end up picking it apart every time you drink it. Oh yeah, now I do get that flavor that they said that. Yeah, blah, 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 blah.
No way.
So I say that I'm still really enjoying it, to be fair.
Yeah,
So
still crushing it.
yeah, this is definitely a smasher as well.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's nice, nice crispy boy, good sort of like.
Has it got a nice bit of
noble hop
maltness?
flavor.
A little
Yeah,
bit, a little bit
really,
of malt.
yeah, it's the floor malted pilsner, so it's got that really nice sort of like sweet, quite rich kind of pilsner malt flavor to it. But there's a good balance of. I think one of the things that got slightly downgraded on in the scoring was it being a little bit too bitter.
Yeah.
But I mean, it just like. I think it is for a Hellas, but it's nice for a general lager sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah. So yeah,
it's probably because it's probably because it came from a Bohemian Pilsner originally.
Yeah.
And Bohemian Pilsners are always super high hopped, and it's been toned back from that and a wee bit more, and then the malt bill was changed up for
to
be more Hellas sort of thing.
I don't think I adjusted the recipe to account for my hops having a slightly higher AA as well. So it was kind of still not high IBUs, but towards the top end of like what the hell is guidelines say it should be. So not like I said, not much. It's probably about 25 or something like that. But I think a lot of the recipes you can probably drop that down to like 20 or even 15 for Hellas. So. But yeah, it's really nice. Lovely clarity on it as well. So we can do the clarity wars. No gelatin.
Bullshit.
There's no gelatin in it.
Bullshit.
There's no gelatin in it.
It's probably
didn't need it. Harvest yeast.
This one's got no gelatin in it.
Drops out like a rock.
Don't know.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like basically any beer that you don't really dry hop, I don't seem to have any issues with clarity in the keg. It'll just drop out unless you're using a really stubborn yeast that's
English,
not going to flocculate. So
some stubborn English yeast.
Yeah, there's a few like fucking London Ale from the 5 Points beer. That's
London Ale 013. That is
Just
insane.
doesn't have it.
And then see what about West Yorkshire? Because I'm finding that doesn't really.
I think
I
that
have
should
no
that
issues.
should drop clear. Yeah, no, that's generally supposed to be quite a
It's
flocculent
maybe
one,
the
I
first
think.
few pints. I've just started it on the hand pull. I did a best bitter, calling it the best badger bitter, obviously. But
Gotta be
yeah,
done.
it's so I actually did gelatin that to try and get it to drop, but it's on the hand pull, but then it's not on a floating. It's still on a dip. So I think it's just clearing from the bottom, to be honest. So
Give it time, mate. Give
Yeah.
it time.
yeah. Well, it's been 28 days since it's been kegged as well. So
It should be there or thereabouts by now. Then,
yeah.
yeah, cool.
So,
So-
should we get into the myths?
Let's
What
do it.
is a home brewing myth? I think we need to give them a little bit of background on this one.
Go on then. Give us some context to the discussion.
Essentially, a home brewing myth is something that people tell you is the law. You must do this, or you must not do this, or you have to do things a certain way. And I think one of the things that people don't really appreciate about brewing is there's more than one way to skin a cat. There really is. And just because somebody says you must do this doesn't mean you actually have to do it. There are ways around everything. And some of the things that people tell you to do are just downright bullshit. And at that point, my scientific, analytical, logical brain just goes, nope. And I think what we're going to do over the next probably couple of hours is we are actually going to take a lot of the things that either we've been told or other people that we know have been told, and we're going to say, is this right? Is this wrong? Do you absolutely have to do this? Is this something you should absolutely avoid? And I think at that point, we're going to dispel a few myths.
Hopefully.
Well, we'll see. Maybe you might find a lot of people will agree with this, but some people might actually not realise it is a myth, and
they're wrong.
And they'll learn.
Yeah. So I think it's a mixture of stuff, really, isn't it? Where it's some things where it's just sort of the common kind of thoughts on things which are maybe a little bit misguided, shall we say, and then others where it's like things that people think are kind of conventions, which are I think there's often a lot of stuff that comes from sort of commercial,
absolutely,
large scale brewing that people think will translate directly down to homebrew, which isn't necessarily the case. And just also just things that, like, if you're doing it at a homebrew scale where it doesn't necessarily apply in that same way. So I think the way we're going to do this is to sort of initially start off in terms of like the brewing process and go through the different myths that apply to each part. So we're going in at the mashing in step, so the first sort of part of your brew day, or even the bit before that, because what we're going to talk about initially is water and water chemistry. And I think this one is, I don't think there's one single myth necessarily, but I think the point that we wanted to make on this one was that you do see a lot of people on forums and Facebook groups and all that kind of stuff. When water chemistry is raised, there'll always be somebody who chirps in and goes, water chemistry is not that important, don't bother with that sort of thing, or
leave it to the absolute last.
Sort everything else out first. Water chemistry is like not that important.
Yeah, that's pro,
etc. So I guess I think the thing with this one for me is it's basically like sometimes yes, but a lot of the time it's just totally down to the context of what your water is like in the first place. So like water chemistry for you, Andy, as far as the importance of it to brewing just
a lager,
a lager or a generic pale ale or whatever,
it's
going to be very different to me, where we've got like extremely hard water. So for anyone to sort of go, well, water chemistry, like, it's not that important, don't bother with it. For me, it's like, no, go and find out what your water actually is first and how it might be affecting your beer, and then you can make a judgment as to how important it is, because like we're saying, the example for you is you could probably brew like pale ales and lagers and stuff off the bat with tap water, no issues, and not really need to worry too much about the water chemistry to an extent.
It'll be okay,
Yeah.
you know, but will it be awesome? Maybe not. And that's maybe the next level sort of thing. Whereas you might find tricky, you're trying to brew a lager and you're like, this just doesn't, it's not right.
I think that's why I kind of got into water chemistry fairly early on, because I knew like straight away that the pale ales, and especially like first couple of times I tried to do lagers and stuff like that, it just wasn't quite there. And I did a little experiment doing like a side by side, just treating the water for pH initially, because with very hard water, what you tend to end up with is a really high pH in your mash. And I'd noticed it wasn't like instantly, oh, that beer is horrible, that beer is awesome. But it was a distinct difference between the two in terms of like, this one has got a really astringent bitterness, like finishing note to it, quite a tannic kind of like tea bag bitterness to it. And the other one just didn't, because the pH had been treated. It's like the water's been treated to neutralize the bicarbonates and bring that pH down. So for me, it was like straight away from then, it was like, okay, I'm going to go further into water chemistry because it's made a clear and obvious effect to me straight away. Where do you sit on water chemistry, Chris? Because you kind of had water that was quite good initially.
I did
in that sort of context, and then not so much after that. Is that right?
So I had water that used to come out and it was very, very, very soft, and it was taken from a well not too far away from me, like probably literally about a mile and a quarter, mile and a half down the road, and it was brilliant. It was lovely. It was soft. Bicarbonate was really low. It was basically, it was probably 60 points removed from RO. It was really, really soft.
Chris, is this like where you're staying now? You're saying there was a well from where you are now?
Yeah, not too far from where I am.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you come out my house, go up the big hill towards the psychiatric unit. You didn't come that way. You went the other way. But you go up a big hill, psychiatric hospital, you turn left, and basically other side of that road, there's a big water plant, and that's where the well was, where they were getting all the water. And then they did a massive like housing estate where they needed water for, like 2,500, 3,000 more houses. And so we started getting our water from a different place. It comes from basically over Normanton way, which is not too far from me, but it's far enough away.
Yeah.
And apparently that's basically just filtered through limestone, which means it's hard as fuck.
Chalky.
And I went from water that I could pretty much brew anything with, and it was really, really nice, to water that, it came out the tap in lumps. And it wasn't until I actually did a water hardness test on it and found that I was way up. I mean, what are you, Tricky, on your bicarb where you are? You're about 400-500, aren't you?
No, not quite that high. It's about 220 on the bicarb, but total dissolved solids is about 550 or something, like for everything.
Because I was sitting just over 300 on bicarb.
What?
Yeah, and then I've got a mate who works for Yorkshire Water, and he used to tell me when they were swapping wells. So they used to swap wells, like, oh, next week we're taking from such and such, so you might want to change, and all this sort of stuff. And it just kind of, it didn't change back to the lovely soft well. It just stayed at the other fucking well. So I had no choice but to go RO. But the one argument about this entire water chemistry thing that really gets on my tits is this. It's if your water tastes good, it's good enough to brew with. Now, I have never heard so much bullshit in my entire life.
You're used to your local water, so...
Exactly. If your water tastes bad, you're not going to drink it anyway. It might still have a bicarb of 700, but you're not going to notice that. You may notice a slight chalky flavour, but you're not going to notice that.
I'll
On-
notice it.
On a similar note to that, actually, another one that kind of winds me up is
creamy.
people going, "Oh, check the pH of the water before you use it. If it's like 7 or whatever, it'll be fine." It's like, what the fuck are you talking about? It's just like that's got nothing to do with anything.
No, it's
Yeah.
got nothing to do with it. And to
Acid
be
water.
fair, the whole if water tastes good argument falls flat because your taste buds can't detect probably 60-70% of the things that are going to make your water bad for brewing. Or not bad, bad is the wrong word to use, suboptimal. It's not going to be what it could be. And I just moved straight to RO. I bought a system, connected it up, moved to RO, got some salts, and never looked back. And
I'm
to be
so glad I
fair,
didn't need to get into that.
yeah, but you might, because they might choose a different well.
What, from taking the water from England?
Yeah, they might do. They might
No.
pipe the shit from Normanton straight up to you, mate, and then you'd be royally fucked.
I think I'm okay.
Yeah, I think you'd be golden.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Water chemistry, it doesn't make a minimal difference. It makes a massive difference. You brew a hoppy beer with hard water and then brew exactly the same beer with super soft water, and you tell me what the difference is, because there will be this harsh, astringent bitterness, which is horrific. It's horrible.
Yeah, it makes an even bigger difference when you start getting into brewing like especially like modern styles like NEPAs and things like that nawadays. It
Don't forget the nipple.
important. And the nipples as well. Yeah, it's like we were saying, it's just all about the context, isn't it, really? And another, like, just referencing brewlosophy on this one a minute, like, as far as like a lot of their tests basically don't return any significant results. You can
Totally.
criticize that in terms of like how rigorous the testing is, or the how they go about setting the tests up and everything. But one thing that does consistently come up is all of the ones they do about water chemistry and like water profiles and things like that tend to return very significant results in terms of there being like detectable flavor differences. So, as I said, like, you can say what you like about the way they go about doing those things, but the fact that the majority of their testing doesn't actually deliver any obvious difference, apparently, versus all the stuff with water chemistry actually returning significant results, I think that does tell you a little bit there.
Can I also just say to our listeners that maybe haven't got into water chemistry and how easy it can be is make sure you get like a Brewfather subscription. If you're not using, brewing software, if you're using kits or whatever, you might find actually what you can do is you can plug a kit, like an all grain kit, into Brewfather. Because I'll do that if I buy a from Malt Miller or whoever else an all grain kit, I'll still plug it into Brewfather, and then what I'll do is then I'll tie up my water profile, and it's a case of putting in my water that I've got and the water I want. So if it's for a pale hoppy lag, or a lager or whatever, I'll put that in, and then I just hit auto, and it spits out exactly the amount of salts and what salts you need to do to put in to make that profile. And then also you can then do your acid treatments as well. So it'll tell you to get whatever pH. If you want to try and hit 5.2, 5.4, whatever for your mash pH, then it does it. And it's so easy.
I think you can approach it like step by step as well. You don't have to dive in and do everything straight away. So like for me, it was, I think first thing I started playing around with was just trying to use Camden tabs and stuff to like neutralize chlorine in the water, which is a really good starting point if you're using tap water, just to try and take that potential issue out of the equation. And then I looked at pH, so I just started doing acid treatment before I was worrying about water profiles, and then following on from that, eventually got into sort of the full water profiles, and then using RO water and everything else. So you can keep it a little bit simpler by just sort of gradually working towards the full sort of like water profiles and water treatment thing. But that's the way I found was made it a bit easier to get an understanding of what was going on anyway.
Yeah, you don't have to jump straight in with RO, building your own profiles and all that. You don't have to do that. Some people may just have, a high bicarb, and you can get around that by adding a little bit of extra acid.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. But
Yeah.
there
Yeah.
are a lot of things that you can cure very simply with very minimal approach.
Well, that's I mean, we joke about like my water, tap water, a lot in terms of that, but actually the base profile, if you take the bicarbonate out, is a fairly decent sort of all round brewing liquor, because it's fairly balanced, like sulfate and chloride, good quantity of calcium, and nothing extreme in terms of the other minerals in there. So if you strip out the bicarbonates, you've actually got like a really good all-round brewing water that will give you decent results with everything else. And again, that was why I sort of like, I think, noticed quite a quick difference just by doing the acid treatment on it. So
tricky, I guess, if you're doing like darker beers and stuff like that, then you can just go all tap water.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like that's the if I'm doing a porter or a stout, then that's when the tap water here actually comes into its own, because it's actually perfect for getting your pH right in the the happy window sort of thing without adding anything else to it. So yeah.
Good.
That's a
All
good
right,
thing,
cool.
man. Let's move on from water chemistry, because I believe you can listen to episode 5 and get all you need.
Yeah, there's a whole lot more on that topic.
And
episode 5.
Jimmy also went through a bit of it in our last episode as well, wasn't it?
He did.
Yeah, with the calcium, the high calcium he has, and what he gets.
We say we're moving on, but the next bit is a little bit water chemistry related. So that the tannins. Let's make sure that we're explaining the myth first of all. So a lot of people will say that if you sparge with water that's too hot, you're automatically going to be extracting tannins from the grain, and that's going to create a really sort of harsh, astringent bitterness that we've talked about already. Now this one is there's a very quick way to sort of torpedo that myth by talking about decoction mashing, because essentially you're taking the grain out and boiling it. So if there was an issue there of extracting tannins, decoction mashing by its very nature would be causing that problem in the same way that a hot sparge would, surely, you would think. But it doesn't. So you need to dig a little bit deeper into that. And it comes back to the water chemistry thing, where it's basically a pH issue rather than a temperature issue. But as with all kind of chemical reactions, if you increase the heat there, it's going to increase the rate of that reaction. So you're going to end up
He's been listening.
with the pH having a greiter, the pH,
the
high pH having a greater impact than it would have normally, basically. So it's I'll let Chris dive in on this one.
You've just done it. You've just done it.
Is that sufficient?
That is literally the entire point. The higher the pH that you have, the more tannins you're going to extract. Is it the higher pH or the lower the pH? Is it the more acidic it is?
The higher the pH, yeah.
So the more alkaline?
More alkaline, more tannins.
Okay.
All right. So
all you've got to make sure is that when you start your brew, that your pH is in the right window, and you're going to avoid 99% of that. And to be fair, if you've got a really, really, really high efficiency, like over 85%, there is a chance that you could extract more tannins with a hotter sparge. And that's purely because you're essentially scraping the barrel when it comes to extracting sugars with your sparge. But, I mean, we've already talked about our high efficiency is better or worse. And the reality is a consistent efficiency is better. And that will negate a lot of the potential for extracting tannins, assuming you start with the correct pH. And your sparge water is obviously treated as well. So if you're gonna sparge, make sure that you split your additives, your water additives, between your mash and your sparge water, to ensure that the process of sparging gives you the correct pH water and correct.
Do you guys bother doing that?
You may need to acidify your sparge water as well, depending.
I don't bother.
I don't do it with RO water because you don't really need to.
No, you don't really need to.
But if I was using tap water, then I would. Yeah.
I put everything in the mash tun.
The problem with that is you can get wash through in the early stages of the sparge. And it can mean that the last the last few liters of your sparge, if it's a particularly big sparge, could potentially take that pH out of range, and you could increase the tannins that you extract. But it's all pH dependent. It's not temperature dependent as much as it is pH dependent.
Okay.
So
sorry, go on.
So whilst yes, the myth technically is true, the reality is it's a different factor to what people say.
Yeah, I don't think I'm getting any tannins or whatever.
I mean, I've tasted your beers, Andy, and to be fair, I don't think you are either. But and I really wanted to say, yeah, you are, but I don't really think you are at all. You'll notice them anyway. It's a really harsh, astringent bitterness. It's like you've boiled 50 grams of Galaxy as your bitter in hop. It's rough.
Nah.
Okay, so I think we've killed that one off a bit quicker than the first point there. So we'll move on to mash temp stability, and there's a specific reason we put this one in that I'm not going to go into the full details of, but essentially I got quite a lot of comments coming back after doing my S40 grain.
Very
review,
professional review, Tricky.
Which well, thank you very much, Andy.
It was.
But yeah, I was quite surprised to get quite a few comments coming off the back of somebody else's video that was put up, which was pretty much saying that mash temp, the variation in mash temps didn't matter because the range, as long as it's in the window, the range for mash temperatures is like 60 to 74 or whatever it actually is.
As long as you're in there.
And as long as you're in that window somewhere, it doesn't matter. And I was just like, okay, but so why does everyone strive to have a really temperature stable mash tun then, if that's the case?
Exactly.
And it's like, it's pretty obvious really, because as we know, or as most people know, your mash temperature, as long as it's in that window, you're going to get fermentable sugars coming out, which is great.
Yeah,
but it's going to affect your final gravity. So the fermentability of those sugars,
one of the variables that can affect.
It's going to change. So basically, you're not necessarily going to hit your target numbers in terms of the recipe and the fermentability of the wort, and therefore the finishing gravity. Therefore, maybe definitely the ABV. Potentially the body, sweetness, dryness, whatever of the beer that you're aiming for might be out from what you're targeting. And it also means your consistency is going to be shot as well, because if your one beer is mashed sort of 3 or 4 degrees lower or higher than another one, you're going to get quite a different result. That can be amplified by the yeast as well. So I've definitely found that there's a lot of yeast which are more sensitive to mash temperature in terms of where they finish final gravity wise. For me particularly, it seems like a lot of English ale yeast, if you mash quite high with them, you can end up with beers like finishing really high teens or even into the 20s, like final gravity, quite easily. So basically for me, from that specific like barrage of comments that I got off the back of it, it seemed like there was people trying to push this argument that mash temperatures don't matter, and I was just like, well, why the fuck is everyone doing their best to insulate mash tuns to keep the temperature within as narrow a range as possible during a mash?
It's a myth. You don't.
That's a myth. Don't bother. Just let it
out the window, and then and you'll make beer.
So
you will make beer, but it's not going to be to your specification. The other thing that I thought was interesting was the mash thickness as well, Tricky. Just how that affects your final gravity as well. So if you have quite a thick mash, then you'll end up again with higher sugars left over at the end. So if you are struggling, it might be that you're basically, your mash is too thin, and that, I wonder how that affects people that just all in one, or brewing a bag, mash and sparge water all in one. If they do find that they end up with a lower final gravity.
I don't at all, and I never have when I've been doing brewing a bag. So yeah, this whole mash temp stability thing, there's a reason why commercial breweries mash in enormous mash tuns. and that's because they hold temperature in the center much better. And I know
They
that
don't have the same issue as us.
no, they don't.
No way.
There's a reason why the mash temp stability is important, and it's because of fucking science, right? And I don't give a shit what that hairy arm fuck nugget said, right? The bottom line is there is a specific range at which the shape of the enzyme is in the perfect shape to do what it needs to do. And yes, pH affects that, but temperature affects it as well. And if mash temps didn't matter, then there'd be no such thing as enzymic activity or pKa. People would be mashing at 40 degrees because it's cheaper to heat your water to 40 degrees. Do you know what I mean? It's just blatant stupidity.
I don't think that's the argument. I think the argument
it's not 40. That was the argument.
Not 40 degrees, Chris, but I think
it wasn't that
window.
Quite extreme. Yeah,
it's the window.
But what I'm saying is,
it's the 60.
If it
60
didn't,
feet or whatever.
If it didn't make
22.
a difference, people wouldn't care. And people do care, and people do strike at a certain temperature, and they do take into account grain temperature, and they do take into account thermal mass of their mash vessel. They do. And people like me have created entire all-in-one systems with recirculation, which is heated with 2 fucking points of measuring to make sure I don't.
Or HEMS, like I've got the HEMS
systems or RIM systems.
Yeah,
they would be completely invalid if this point was anywhere near true.
But the reason why you'll see a lot of commercial breweries, like Chris, earlier point you mentioned, Chris, is why they don't bother with a HERM system is because
it's massively expensive.
The thermal mass. Well,
exactly.
The thermal mass, effectively, they know if we mash in at this temp, then it's going to be this, and it is just always, they know exactly. Because
that's a good point, because like HERM systems and like actively heated mash tuns and all-in-one system, all that, those are all basically built to counteract the fact that your smaller mass is going to lose temperature quicker, aren't they? So
exactly. So your grandfather's
like inherent in the
same
design.
Nobody would use a thermopot for a mash tun if it didn't matter. And this is what annoys me. Your mash temperature has to be bang on, and it has to remain within a degree of where you start it before it gets to the end of the mash to allow you optimum conversion. And that's what we're after. We're after giving this beer the best chance that it can have to get to the end and have done what it needs to do. And to say otherwise is just fucking dishonest.
And what was the S40's temperature window? Was it plus or minus 2 degrees?
Well, the issue with it was that the controller didn't switch back on until it had dropped by 3 degrees. Now, they said that it was like, actually, it's more like 2.1 because it's like the resolution of the actual numbers on the screen is higher than what it's actually like a full degree or whatever. But even then, you've got like,
you're like what?
It's just flying up and down by like 2 degrees. And then because it's got that variation, like you see quite a big variation across the mash. So like if you're measuring the temperature at different points, it's just like fucking all over the place. And yeah, I mean, I was seeing like 5, 6, 7 degrees difference between the top and the reading coming out, because it's circulating while it's cooling down so quickly. And obviously the design for that one particularly, that's the issue. The lid, there is no lid on when it's mashing if you're using it as it's intended, and therefore you've just got heat just going out the top, and the temperature on the top layer is like just dropping rapidly, so you don't really know where your mash temperature is. Which was my issue with it, that I thought was fairly raised in that video, but other people didn't think so.
To be fair, at least they're good for doing sous videing. Right, so next point on the list, I want to move away from that because it just makes me fucking angry. Better efficiency equals better beer. I have never read such bollocks in my life. Right? No, it doesn't. No, it fucking doesn't. Better efficiency means you've saved money. It doesn't necessarily...
You're like, it is. It says on my cock.
94% efficiency. Yeah, your cock's still 3 mil long. But it does not mean that you're going to make a better beer. It actually means you have more chance of extracting bad stuff. That's what it means. So, yeah,
I think we can, like, you know, if you're at the very extreme ends of this, then, you know, like if your efficiency is so bad that you're probably not getting anywhere near, you know, conversion happening and you've got loads of starch left in it, then that might be an issue. But
Yeah.
essentially, I'd rather have like be able to hit 70%
All the
every time,
Yeah.
Yep.
regardless on each beer, than be hitting like somewhere between 90 and 80%. On different things, because it's just like you already
though.
mentioned this. Basically, consistency is the important thing.
It's the size,
in terms of
like the
numbers.
thickness. Tricky, the thickness of your mash is like how big a beer you're doing. So if you're doing an IPA, you're not going to get the same efficiency as if you're doing, you know, a blonde ale or something, or
Yep.
whatever.
no, but every brewer knows his kit. Every brewer should know his kit.
Well, it takes time to know your kit, doesn't it?
You've just had 2 years of lockdown where you've been working from home.
I know. Yeah, I know.
You
my
should
kit,
have been dialing in your shit on your system. Is what you should have been doing,
Well,
right?
if you don't take notes, then you won't be dialing it in.
Exactly.
So take notes of what efficiencies you're getting, and then you know what kind of beers and what you did wrong or whatever.
Yeah. I mean, the first time I did an impy, I did it on a 3 vessel, and I was expecting 79%, and I got 70%. You know,
Well, impy, you know.
I mean, it was a big impy as well.
That's not bad though. 70% on an impy.
Pretty good.
That's pretty,
like 60, 65, I think, first time I did it.
It took some doing to get it to 70%. Do you know what I mean? But the bottom line is, it does not mean that you're going to make better beer. It doesn't. That is an absolute myth, and I will happily bust that one right now. It does not. And I want to go into something now, because I give Tricky shit about this. Rightly so, because he's my friend and he deserves it. But people who talk about batch sparge versus fly sparge, fuck me.
It works.
A perfectly set up fly sparging system, which is tuned, practiced, and honed, will give you the same efficiency as a batch sparging system, which is honed and you know what you're doing, right? It should give you pretty much identical. And for the idiots, you know, those people should be able to do better with a batch sparging system, because they don't know how to tune a fly sparging system. And I give Tricky a bag of shit, and I call it the Luddites method.
Wins the race.
Well, that's what she said. But I give Tricky shit about, you know, batch sparging being the Luddites method and all that. And it really isn't. It's quicker, it's less hassle, and if done properly, will give you just as good an efficiency as if you are running a well-tuned fly sparging system.
It's a fly sparge system on my kit is so much easier to do. I don't even know. Yeah, I suppose I would empty my full mash tun of all the all the wort, and then fill it back up and then whisk it about, I suppose. And then I would need to recircuit instead of slowly just trickling over and transferring the two. Yeah. Batch sparging actually sounds an absolute bollock, but I suppose if you're doing brew in a bag, you just take out one pot, you can put it in another one, and then I've seen Big Banana do that. He takes it out and puts it in another one, then mixes up the grains, tries to wash them, leaves it for a bit.
Yeah,
that's
it.
Well, mine's sort of a weird hybrid version of batch sparging, where it's like I'm draining out of a mash tun into the kettle as normal, and then rather than fly sparging, I just dump all the sparge water in one go and then stir it up. And
why don't you
I
try
recircuit a bit?
Why are you not trying fly sparge?
Well, I just don't have the stuff to do it with, and I can't be asked to buy it. So
he's too busy shilling. That's what it is.
What else do you need? A pump?
No, I've got the pump. I just need a sparge arm and
if your abilities should be able to knock something like that.
Yeah, but it's just I don't see the.
You could get a video out of that.
Well, actually, now that you mention it, maybe I will build one.
Holy shit! We found the one thing that Tricky doesn't have a video for. Okay,
but no, I just find it quicker and easier to batch sparge, basically, and I've always
And you get consistent results.
And I get pretty consistent results. I'll just stick
And
with
he's
that.
a Luddite.
And it's quicker as well. I think it does speed. I think that's one
It
thing you
does.
can say.
You are a lot quicker.
It is faster than
definitely
fly
is.
sparging. So
Yeah.
I can't be spending a fucking hour fly sparging. I ain't got time for that shit. You've met my kids. I don't have time for that shit. So the one thing that I want to sort of drag this into is directly into the next point, and that is when you finish doing whatever kind of mash / sparge you're doing, there is this amazing myth out there that if you squeeze the bag, you're gonna transfer bad stuff.
All right, now you get more good stuff, do you not?
What a load of bollocks.
More juice.
I love this, right? Unless you happen to be Garth, Thor, the Hulk, right? And you're squeezing so hard, you're actually forcing bits of grain through your bag. No, you're not. I squeeze my bag like it owes me money, right? I know exactly what level I need to be at in order to start my boil and end up with the right volume. You better believe I'm squeezing that bag until I get to that volume. Better believe it. Oh, mate, like it owes me money. I do. Again, it's pH dependent. All right,
Chris trying to boost his efficiency.
This is one of those pH dependent things. Oh, you're going to extract tannins, blah, de, blah, de, blah, de, blah. Shut the fuck up and keep using a secondary. These people who come up with this bullshit, they deserve to be slapped. They really do. There is no possible way that it can cause a problem. Scientifically, it cannot. I'm done.
Well,
somebody else do one.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for clearing that one up.
I'm here all week.
Mic drop. Carapils.
Carapils. Carapils.
Carapils.
This is an interesting one, I think, because this is one of the. This is definitely a brewlosophy experiment, isn't it? Where they're like,
yeah, it was, and they tried. Oh,
it doesn't do shit.
Hang on, just a second. Brett Harmon's just asked me. He says he hopes I have marigolds on. Asbestos hands, mate.
The bag.
I ain't wearing fucking gloves. Ain't got time for that.
Anyway,
shit.
So coming back to Carapils, like I said, the Brewlosophy have definitely done experiments on this, and it's one of the ones where like, no, it doesn't. This is their one of their myths that they
debunked.
Apparently busted.
Yeah, busted. Yeah,
and said, oh, Carapils doesn't actually make any difference. But I've got a feeling that there might be different views to that on here. This is one I'm not really sure if I've got an opinion on it, because I don't. I mean, I've probably used Carapils loads, but have I actually ever sort of made a judgment on whether it's making a big difference to the beer or not? I don't know. What do you think? I think Chris has got an opinion from the looks of things.
Yeah.
So this is my IPL. There are 2 grains in here, and that is it. There is Pilsner, and there is whatever it is that we're talking about. Carapils. Cara Vienna. No, not Cara Vienna. Carapils / Cara Foam is called. This head is here because of Carapils, right? The viscosity of the liquid gives you the head. It gives you the stability of head.
Is Carapils got other names?
Carafoam.
Carafoam, Caradextrin.
Yeah, dextrin malt.
Dextrin malt.
Yeah.
When I made a very similar to beer to this, using just Pilsner, no head. I put Carapils in, head. 1 and 1 makes 2, bitches.
Arrest my case, Your Honor.
1 and 1 makes 2. Come on.
What do you think, Andy?
I agree. I mean, it adds. Does it not add more longer chain sugars? It's like a slightly crystallized malt, isn't it? So it gives you the kind of those sugars. It gives a slightly higher finishing gravity, but you only use it in small amounts anyway, so it's not really going to make that much of a difference to your final gravity. It will make, but
I'll be honest. A couple of points is all you need to keep the head. It's all you need. You just need a few longer chain sugars in the end. It's gonna affect the surface tension, which is gonna increase the foam. There you go.
It gives a it gives a different mouthfeel as well, does it not?
Yeah, it gets a little bit thicker, a little bit more coating.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. There you
That's
go.
exactly right, Mr. Brooks. If you use pills, you get head. Apparently.
No, yeah, carapils.
That's what she
Carapils, not
said.
just pills.
That's what she
Well,
said.
What kind of pills?
Are
No,
we done with
no.
mashing before we go any further down that road?
Yeah, we're just going to leave that one right there, Andy.
Let's park that one.
Yeah,
I don't
park.
need pills.
Okay, so I think that's all the mashing myths that we wanted to look at. So we're into the boil, and the main one here, and I think this is one that you know, obviously there's been quite a lot of discussion of this in the past. I think we've all probably experimented with this in terms of trying out different methods to a fairly extreme end of the scale. Certainly in me and Chris's case, I think for boil times. Don't know about you, Annie. I'm not sure how much you've experimented with boil times. You tried anything other than the standard 60 minutes?
I'll do the 60-90. And it was interesting in the last pod, Johnny mentioned it, that he'll do a 60-minute boil for all ales and stuff like that, and he'll do a 90 for lagers because of if he's using Pilsner malt, then it's all to do with your DMS.
Yeah. So I guess that just to rewind a second, the myth that we're talking about is that a sort of 60 or 90-minute boil is essential, basically.
Yeah.
And I mean, in my opinion, it's basically no. Certain beers, it's probably more important, but
no.
Generally speaking, no.
No.
I mean, basically,
have you noticed any DMS in your beers, Tricky? Have you sent it off to get analysed?
To be fair, I don't think DMS is ever an off flavour that has been, certainly in beers that I've sent. I mean, I've got to qualify that by saying, like, I don't think I've ever sent off a short boil beer to a competition or anything like that. But I have sent out that, talking about the extreme end of the scale. Quite a long time ago, I did attempted to do like a 1 hour all grain brew day and did a video on that.
I remember that. There was a video.
And that was basically 15-minute mash, 15-minute boil.
Yeah.
To really like push the envelope sort of thing.
That was back in the golden age.
And the beer, it came out. Yeah, I mean, to me, it didn't have any obvious off flavors to it. And I did actually send that one off to Dr. Hans. And he's quite well known for being fairly unforgiving when it comes to beer reviews, and he didn't really pick any faults with it either. The only thing with that beer that I think that I did notice really was that maybe it sort of retained a little bit of haziness when it maybe shouldn't have necessarily, because it certainly wasn't like mega hot or using a haze inducing ingredients or whatever. So I think perhaps more to do with the mash, there was maybe a lack of conversion and quite a bit of starch left in there, perhaps, that might have caused the haziness.
Tricky invented the
I don't know. But yeah, I mean, there's an argument to that as to whether that's actually necessarily a massive issue. But anyway, so as far as the boil goes, it was a 15-minute boil, and I think I was using Galaxy hops in that one, so you can get plenty of bitterness out of that without having a long boil.
Was it your 2015?
Exactly. So, but yeah, anyway, so I've tried that. I've done 30-minute boils, and I've never had any obvious issues with them, essentially.
I remember you doing that video, Tricky, all those years ago.
That was the most hectic brew day ever. It was only like a fucking 1 gallon batch on the stovetop, but it was just like, shit, what's going on? I've got to do throw this in there, like timers going off left, right, and center. I've not pursued the short brew day method since then.
No.
It's just like
it's hectic as fuck.
It's a pain in the ass, like sometimes having brew days as long as they are, but like going to the extreme end of trying to do it all in an hour is just ridiculous. So yeah, I wouldn't recommend.
Yeah, like that.
Well, you did it though, didn't you? Was it 58 minutes?
It was just under. It was just under. The main limiting factor was like the cooling and heating times. Like the actual, the rest of it, like doing the mash and the boil in 30 minutes was no issue. It was just trying to get it heated up and to the boil and cooled back down again. That was the limiting thing. So I could have sped it up even more if I'd done a no chill on it. Probably, I reckon a 45-minute is feasible if you did no chill.
Yeah, I mean, I love it when I read on Brewlosophy that they've done short and shoddy, 15, 15, 30, 30, whatever they've done, 20, 20. It's like, it just goes to show what is capable, what is possible. And I do love the fact that they're willing to push back the foreskin of science a little bit.
There we go.
I had to get it in.
The catchphrase.
I think it's a really, really, really good thing to be able to do, to say, look, this is possible. You can do this. You are still going to get beer out of the other end. It is still going to be drinkable. I just found that the brew day was too hectic.
Yeah,
I did. I mean, I said to you, I've done a 30-30 when I made that NEPA. It was a 30-30. And it was like, I was just running around like a headless chicken, just trying to get stuff done in the right amount of time. It was so hard.
Yeah.
But I prefer
there's obviously situations where, you got to think about what the purposes of the boil are going to be. So you've got sterilizing the wort, you've got extracting or isomerizing the alpha acids to give you the bitterness, and you've got driving off the off flavors. Now, as far as the sort of sterilizing side of things goes, I mean, like 10 minutes, the same as you would do like a starter or whatever, is
10-12 minutes,
is going to be adequate. If you've got high alpha hops, then you can get any bitterness that you require easily within sort of 10-15 minutes, if you're doing it that way. Now, obviously, for certain styles where you're wanting to get maybe less of that late addition sort of hop profile from it, obviously having a 60-minute boil is more beneficial there, where you just want sort of fairly clean bitterness from the hops and not much else of the character coming through. So for certain styles, but a lot of modern styles, again, this is where maybe the shorter boil comes into its own, because you don't really need that early boil addition as such. And as far as like driving off the off flavors and stuff, again, I don't think like a full 60-minute boil is necessarily required in most cases for that.
No, I don't think it is either, to be fair. I think there's a lot of things that, when it comes to the myths, they've just always been done that way.
Yeah.
And I think that's where people confuse tradition with requirement. And yeah, definitely with the 60-minute boil, it is not required. I mean, I know people who do 30-minute boils when it comes to, NEPAs, because what's the point in boiling it for an hour?
Yeah,
just reduce your volume in the first instance. You're only boiling stuff off. That's all.
I mean, don't get me wrong. The majority of beers I still do a 60-minute boil, but I think the point is, feel free to experiment, try different things out. It's not going to ruin the beer if you do a 30-minute boil or
no, absolutely not,
or whatever.
Depends how much you want to rinse the grains, and then if you have a higher starting boiling, then you can then reduce and you can get more out of the grains you've got. I mean, we're talking about efficiency.
That's a good point. I didn't mention obviously boiling it down.
You maybe want a high ABV, so having that longer boil instead of 30-minute boil, it just means that you're going to have more grains in your mash, and if you might have like a restricted on your mash space as well, especially for a commercial. It's a way of getting those extra points. Yeah.
No, absolutely. But we are talking about homebrew at the moment rather than commercial. So, yeah. No, definitely. Definitely. Right. Who's taking the next one?
I feel like you want to take it, Chris.
No. I could sit here and rant and rave about most of these, to be fair.
Is it hot side aeration?
Hot side aeration. Andy, got any thoughts on this?
Just from what Chris has taught me, and also from my own sort of when I'm dropping it in, it's getting aerated. I'm pretty much, when I'm taking it from my mash tun and dropping it into the kettle, it is getting aerated. because it's dropping from a height, but I've never noticed any difference. And mainly it's probably because the boil actually drives off any of the kind of oxygen, the dissolved oxygen anyway. So that's probably why we don't have any issues. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just
Chris?
never
Oh.
been a concern for me, and I don't
No.
really think it should be, basically.
Now, it can be an issue, but it depends how long it is between putting it into the kettle and boiling. Because at the point where you boil, you're driving off gases, okay? And that's an important thing to remember at this point. But it is 90% bollocks. It really is. And I understand there's a whole sphere of home brewers who call themselves low-dough brewers, low dissolved oxygen and all that. And I get it. And if that's your fucking boat, then you paddle it. All right. But the reality is this. Putting oxygen into your beer when you're about to boil it is temperature dependent. Okay. You don't want to make that oxygen super reactive. And most of the things that are going to oxidize are going to get metabolized anyway. So I think the reality is it's very easy to avoid hot side aeration. Like, nobody's going to take a whisk to their boil kettle. It's not something that somebody's going to do. But at the same time, it does happen to a lesser degree, but I think the most important thing to remember is the time between the aeration occurring and the liquid actually boiling. That's basically what I read into it. So mostly bollocks, but it can happen. And if you've got, let's say, for sours, for kettle soured beers, yeah, this could be a problem. But for things like, you know, I mean, fuck, I've made some Neepers and Jesus Christ, I splash it around like it's aftershave. Do you know what I mean? And I don't think it makes that much of a difference for me. I've never produced a purple Neeper. So, yeah, there we go. It's such a situationally dependent thing that it's so easy to avoid. Just avoid it anyway.
I think it's like if you go out of your way to try and, you know, oxidize the wort while you're on the hot side, maybe you could cause a problem. But, you know, as long as you're not attacking it with a fucking paint stirrer, then you'll probably be all right. Yeah?
Unless you're dropping in a nozzle and literally pumping pure oxygen into it, you're probably going to be all right. I think that's the hot side aeration. I understand the Lodo guys, and I understand. Yeah, and to be fair, Dan Walters has just pointed out something very important. Mash recirculation is introducing oxygen.
It would be introducing quite a lot of oxygen, wouldn't it?
It does, yeah.
It would. Yeah. Nobody seems to have an issue with that. I don't see anybody doing their recirculating mash under the surface.
Some of them spin. The
exactly.
big breweries.
Well, yeah, some of them are going through essentially a sparge arm where you've got the spray balls and massive amount of oxygen or oxygen aeration even going on with that.
Yeah, exactly. And to be fair, that's kind of, to be fair, that shuts it down completely.
Yeah, that's pretty much an instant myth buster there, isn't it? Really,
yeah, it is. It is. I feel one of us should be wearing a stupid hat today. But anyway, yeah, hot side aeration. I understand it. If Lodo is your thing, crack on. Otherwise, just you're going to avoid 90% of it anyway. So I don't see what the problem is.
Yep.
Yeah. Right. Good. Somebody else can cover hops. I'm going to drink the rest of this delicious beer.
Okay, so we've got choice of bittering hop is irrelevant. Now, there's various different issues at hand here. So I think you've got there's just the argument in terms of, like, obviously you've got different alpha acid values for hops, which means if you use a different hop, then certain hops you're going to have to use a lot of them, whereas high alpha acids you won't need as much? Is there going to be more carryover of flavor because you've got a bigger quantity of hop matter in the kettle? I would say yes straight away to that, because I think, you know, if you're using, let's say, for example, a low alpha noble hop versus something high alpha acid and only like 5 or 6 grams of it, there's going to be a difference there in terms of the flavor output. So there's obviously this this thing of like, oh yeah, if you be boiling for 60 minutes, you're going to eradicate everything apart from the bitterness. Don't agree. I think there's always going to be some carryover of flavor from
flavor. Yeah, I totally agree, Tricky.
Yeah.
Like, I've noticed you definitely get a flavor carryover now. If you use something super clean like Magnum, it can be, you know, you get that Magnum flavored bitterness where it's like, you know, that really high sort of, I don't know, high sort of clean sort of acid sort of thing, but it's like maybe a slight pepperiness, or, you know, just a tiniest amount sort of thing. There's Columbus, it'll be like this super dank sort of bitterness. Chinook as well, you know, and then if you use, like you're saying, like a lot, so like use Saz, I take it you get that Saz carryover when you're drinking it. Yeah, and it's a 60-minute boil.
And there's, I think you've touched on something there as well, where you've got a difference in character between certain types of hops as well, where you might be using them in the same quantity, but they're just going to have a different. So like a Magnum would be super clean versus something like a Chinook. Even if it's similar alpha acid, you're going to get a different character from that.
That pine will probably come through. I'd imagine there'll be a slight pine.
And you've got the cohumulone. Is that how you say it? Cohumulone, I think, is the word, but there's a particular chemistry to certain hops where they're higher in the cohumulone, which will affect supposedly affect the character of the bittering as well. Some would say they can be a little bit more harsh, or but others would say you just get better value for your bitterness from those hops, so you should just use less of them. Perhaps. So there's things like that as well.
Tricky, you wouldn't buy a kilo of Magnum, would you?
Who would do that?
Who would do that?
Crazy.
What kind of crazy bastard would buy a kilo of Magnum? I mean, you'd have to be mental.
Unless you owned a brewery, I suppose, then you'd maybe get through it in about a year.
You could maybe get through it then.
I mean, does anybody want to buy any Magnum?
Yeah, I'll do you a good price. Any listeners who need some Magnum, get in touch with Chris.
I'm sure I bought 225 grams from Cross Maloof of Magnum, and
still using it.
It has served me well.
I'll be honest with you, I bought the Magnum because it was super cheap, and the bottom line is I'm still using Southern Cross. Just going back to the choice of bitter and hop being irrelevant, I think that is absolute bullshit. Purely because I've used Southern Cross to bitter beers, and you get that lime character. You get that flavour carryover.
Do you get any pine from Southern Cross?
Not really, no. But you do from Magnum, and with Warrior, I tend to get something that's almost like woody kind of.
Yeah,
like you're chewing on a tree. You know, and I prefer Southern Cross because I love citrus. So for me, having that lime character just come into your beer automatically from the thing that you're using to preserve the beer, I think it's beautiful. I genuinely think it's a definite bonus. Yeah. But at the same time, I mean, it's clearly irrelevant. You're using a different fucking hop. Who even says such a thing?
Well, the thing is, we're all guilty of it, you know, where a recipe will say use such a hop at 60 minutes, and you just go, oh, fuck it, I'm just going to put Magnum in, you know?
Well, it comes from this sort of like pseudo-science thing as well, isn't it? Where people latch onto the idea that all the volatile oils are boiling off, so therefore, after 60 minutes, you've only got the isomerized alpha acids, and they will be the same regardless of what hop you're using. But as we've just been saying, I don't think that tells the full story really, and there's going to be some carryover of flavor from that. I don't think you're ever going to be a completely eradicating all of the flavor compounds, even in a
No,
60-minute
absolutely
boil.
not. Absolutely not. You're definitely not going to do that, which is why it's a myth and it's been busted.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Commercial break.
Let's have some commercial beer.
I'm just chewing on my commercial at the minute.
Chewing on it.
Yeah, well, just chewing through it, sort of.
Is it a stodgy number?
No, not at all. It's obviously coming
Oh no,
from.
should be a crispy boy.
It's a May Provisions. It's a saison.
Oh, a
Saison.
Unity beer.
It's
It's
a
a Unity.
season beer.
It's one of the it's their saison 6%, and Chris, it is brewed with Bramling Cross hops.
Nice.
It's got juniper berries in it as well, and autumn rye. It's an autumn rye saison, so I'm guessing it's got rye malt in it, which normally brings rye's quite fruity. Is it?
No, rye
no,
tastes
it's
like
not really.
straight up ass crack.
It's pretty spicy.
It's Chris's second favorite ingredient after Simcoe.
If you were to make me a Rogan beer that was all hopped with Simcoe,
Simcoe.
I think I would probably skull fuck you the next time I met you.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, the aroma on this is just delightful. It's that kind of berry sort of fresh spring sort of. I don't know. It's just full of all the things I'm looking forward to this summer.
It's full of the joys of spring.
You
Is that what you're saying?
It's just like, no, it's hitting you. Or I should say the harvest, to be honest.
Outdoor sex and swimming pools.
Oh, it is. It's that kind of lovely berry, sort of raspberry, sort of springy, sort of. It's just lovely.
That's what
Sounds
we
good.
want. That's not what we want.
But
Oh, you don't like it.
no, I do like it. But see the saison side of it and the juniper berries. It's almost like a kind of hibiscus tea sort of. That kind of, it brings it down. It's not as, it's fruity, but it's almost like the saison's giving it that kind of, it's going from my head, but it's that phenolic. It's got the phenolics, right? That's kind of strange to little old me. Saisons and
He's
me.
not sure about it. He's not sure.
No, but I'm enjoying it because what I love the aroma. And then the actual beer takes you on a little journey sort of thing, and you get different flavours as you go along. So, and the colours, I don't know if I showed you, but it's this lovely golden colour. Nice carbonation.
Yeah.
Oh, you smell it and you're just like, this is going to be good. And then you taste it and it's total different kind of hibiscus tea, phenolic, sort of total different beer that you would expect. But yeah, enjoying it. It's a sipper. It's 6% as well. So yeah.
Nice. So are you done, Andy?
I shall say I am done.
Awesome. So I am on a Vocation Sunset Overdrive, which is a pina colada sour. I've just realised it's an 8% beer. I didn't actually plan on drinking an 8%.
I mean, Owen's not here, so somebody had to.
Somebody's got to pick up the slack, I suppose. So it's pastry sour. What else does it tell me about it? So vibrant mix of flavours and aromas, bold notes of pineapple, coconut and tangerine, hopped with Sabro and Idaho 7. Trying to see if there's actually... Just
on the Unity, I had one of those tricky. I don't know if you got it, and it was like a pastry sour thing that was, I don't know, it was like some sort of pie sort of thing.
Oh, was it a crumble thing or something?
Yeah, crumble thing, and it had cinnamon in it and stuff. And I honestly have I just have wet dreams about that beer, you know. And I went on the website to see if I could go get some more, and it was just, there was none left. I was like, oh no. Absolutely. I mean, the flavour still sticks with me now, and I'm just like, oh. It just...
So Sorry, go on.
No, on you go. I just want to see how this one's stacking
So
up.
in the glass, looks slightly hazy, nice pale color,
Very
not
pale.
much head in it. I couldn't work out if there's any or what actual fruit is in it because it didn't seem to be printed on the can, but
Mhm.
it's the aroma's not super juicy, but it's definitely like got a tropical passion fruit kind of thing going on there. Ooh, and then flavor wise,
Pure baby
the
fruit.
sourness is really the sourness is actually really subdued on this, so it's just a little
Okay.
bit tart, but it's like it's basically like if you're actually eating like passion fruit, it's that sort of like level of tartness, but not like super sour. Lactic kind of tartness to it, and it is just like pure passion fruit, pineapple, fruit juice, basically.
Winner.
The lactose is definitely like softening that one quite a lot. I can't believe it's 8% either, because that's just like that is super dangerous if that's 8%, because you could just chug that no problem.
Tricky. If you brewed any of these kind of beer, if you done a sour beer,
I've never done a sour beer, but I will be
is
doing
that
that shortly.
this year? Yeah.
Well, very soon, because
You've
I've
got to
been
make
sent,
a video about it.
I've been sent
Yeah.
one. The I've forgotten how to say it now, but Biro Baronga or something like that, like lime goes kit from Brew
Is it
Day.
lactobacillus, or are you gonna? Is it
It's
just?
no, it's the whatchamacallit, yeast.
Yeah.
Philly sour yeast. So yeah, it's one of those shitload of limes in it as well, which is obviously going to add quite a bit of acidity as well. But yeah, that would be my first attempt at doing anything like this. But this is like super gentle introductory sour beer style stuff.
Yeah.
This is not like this would be one where, like, I think if anyone was like, oh, I can't drink sour beers, you could probably get most people to enjoy this, I think, even if they're not into sours. So I think that's really nice. Yeah, that's a pretty tasty beverage.
Good.
All right, Chris, go on then.
Well, I am currently drinking a Unity beer called Square Melon.
Table beer.
Hello.
Is that the table?
It's a 2.8% table beer.
Oh, holy shit.
But the thing that really got me about this when I was putting in my order was it says how to put a big thing in a smaller space. Physics says you can't do that, but a small hazy pale with the body and hop character of a bigger beer.
Yeah.
Hopped with Huel melon, Amarillo, and Vic Secret for plenty of deep citrus and tropics. And it is 2.8%, this can.
I've had
now,
it is.
The one thing that I will say about this beer is it's not as hop forward as I thought it was going to be based on the actual description. However, that does not mean that this is a underflavored and weak beer.
It's 2.8%.
It's 2.8, but you get passion fruit and peach and tropics and that softness of melon. And I have to say, I'm pretty blown away by this beer, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Drinkable doesn't even come into it, all right?
This is insane.
This is a chugger, all right? Yeah. This is line me up 4 pints and I'll be all right kind of thing.
Do you think if someone told you that was like a 4.5% beer, you'd be like...
No, I wouldn't believe it's 4.5.
No?
No, it's missing the ethanol body of a 4.5. But at the same time, you could tell me this was 3.5 and I'd believe you.
I thought it's got loads of body.
It does have a thick body, but there is a massive difference between an ethanol body and a unfermentable sugars, oats, that wheat kind of body. There's a massive difference.
Full.
And I do think that,
Loads of juice.
honestly, this is a fucking dangerous beer. Because you could sit
Well, it
down.
shouldn't be too dangerous
If
because
you-
you're going to struggle to get
not in
fish
that
from,
way. Not in
Aye.
that way, Tricky. Not in that way.
It would go
What-
quick.
I could do serious damage to a 6-pack of this over a podcast.
See, if you had a keg of that, you'd be like, yes.
Oh, mate. I'd be having
dangerous
a pint
as in
before work.
financial impact if you're in
Yes.
the
Yeah.
pub. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd be having a
I'm with
pint
you
of this
now.
before work. Do you know what I mean?
This is why the Unity beers, all the Unity beers I had, I was just blown away at how good they all were.
It's incredibly well made.
Yeah.
This is, I mean, this is not the first iteration of this beer. This has been crafted. This has been honed.
Oh, yeah.
So what were your top recommendations from the Unity ones? Because I thought the Conflux, like their sort of standard house pale, was great.
I thought Conflux was all right.
The Pilsner one that you had, Chris, as well, that I'd had.
The
that
rustic pills.
Rustic Pills was really
Fucking
nice.
hell, I've still got a hard on.
Obviously,
that beer.
it seems like that watermelon one, that your square melon thing, would be in your list as well. I didn't actually try that one myself.
Was it
very,
Topper?
very nice.
I'm just seeing it. I put it in my fridge. Topper. I think
I don't
that was the kind of the pie one. You know, the sour.
Well, this is one that I was gonna drink. This is the Baltic Porter.
All right.
But I'll be honest, I want to get to sleep tonight, and I know full well I'm going to be up at 5 o'clock tomorrow with the kids because my daughter fell asleep at 6:30. So I don't really want to be smashing a 7% beer. And I just reached a bit further back, and I'm like, 2.8% table. That'll do.
Please. Exactly.
Sensible choice.
Well, I'm going to be up at
Perfect.
5 o'clock regardless. So you've got to deal with the hand that you've dealt.
Yeah.
So this is a bloody brilliant beer. You could not tell me that this is a 2.8% beer. I would believe 3.5.
Right, just gonna pop for a whiz.
I'd
Carry on.
believe 4. But yeah, nah. This is far too good to be 2.8. Oh man.
Just check, make sure my light isn't on fire yet, Chris.
No, it's not on fire yet. There's been no bangs.
It's that slight electrical smell.
This is a really, really nice beer. A really, really nice beer. Very drinkable. Really good body. That melon overtone with all
Mate,
of
it's just
all of those tropical fruit flavors that just flow, and that just the scaffold layer, the base layer of that melon is just stunning. That is a really nice. In fact, that is a really very, very nice beer. I can't fault that at all. I really can't.
Hey, get the baby wipes out.
They're just up there. It's a good beer. Yeah. I'm having some serious pain with my right knee at the minute, mate.
Mate, getting old.
No, it's not getting old. It's fucked. I don't know what I've done to it, but it's fucked.
Too much sex.
Probably. She's gonna have to go on top. Yeah, it's really fucking sore. Really sore. So I'll be all right.
Get that lube oil with the CBD in it out.
I've almost run out. I don't want to be utterly baked but for those of you who don't know what Andy's talking about, so Holland and Barrett sell a capsaicin and CBD like muscle balm.
Yeah, and you were pimping it heavy to all the old boys.
Yeah, there's 2 different strengths of CBD that they put in it. So there's one which is 50 milligrams per pot, and there's another one which is 300 milligrams per pot, right?
That's the one to get.
Now, I vape CBD, so this is CBD liquid that's in here. I've just put CBD inside these liquids. And I orally take CBD every day, so I take 150 milligrams orally. But then to just add like probably another 40 mig from the amount of this muscle rub that I put on. Oh, mate.
It's all coming out now.
I was baked. It was like the bad old days of university where I was just absolutely fucking baked all the time.
I think when you were telling the boys that one the last time we were all together, I think it was at a library day or something. Everyone was away going up, putting their orders in for it.
It's fucking brilliant stuff. And it really does take away the pain and it makes everything really cold. But
Was it Holland and Barrett?
Yeah. But the addition of the chili kind of makes the skin feel warm so you don't end up with that super cold feeling on your skin. Good stuff. But yeah, Tricky, sorry, this table beer is amazing.
I think we'd established that anyway before I went off. Good.
Did you order this one?
I didn't know. Well, there was a limit because I bought mine via that third-party website. So that
you did, didn't you? Yeah.
So there was a limited supply, but I think I'll be doing a follow-up order with Unity to explore their range a bit. Because when I was on their website, I was like, oh, I'm definitely going to be having all of this stuff. But luckily, I heard from Jimmy just in time that they weren't actually there to fulfill the order, whereas Andy had already clicked the order button, I think.
Yeah, plus I got this funky glass.
Yeah.
For Unity's 5th birthday.
And Andy got a free hat as well.
I did.
Where's your free hat, Andy? Where's your free hat?
I think it's that little blue paper one.
Yeah.
It's like a little Christmas hat.
Jimmy hat.
No Jimmy hat
in your
Wow. What can I say? Clearly he understood.
So that's the commercial break done, I believe.
Yeah, let's call that one done.
Let's move on.
Let's get into some fermentation.
That's it. We're into fermentation myths or not. So the first one is kind of a bit of a. That's like a dual myth there. So we've got aerating wort. We've also got dry versus wet yeast.
No, it's the effect of aerating wort when you're using dry yeast versus wet yeast.
Yeah, there's a difference, isn't there?
Oh, okay.
Allegedly.
Sorry.
Oh, but maybe I'm going to learn something here. Go on.
Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay.
So I put in what my understanding is of the two.
Yeah, go on then.
So dry yeast, you don't need to aerate the wort because it's already got all the oxygen that it needs. Whereas if you're using wet yeast, then you, depending on the gravity, I suppose if it's quite a low gravity, you probably won't because it should be okay. But I think if it's maybe high, like 5% or whatever, you should really aerate the wort. I think as well, it becomes even more important if you're going to harvest that yeast and use it again because it gets spent a bit. And so you really do want to be aerating your wort. Chris can tell us that I'm talking shite.
Absolute bollocks. Okay, so the reason why yeast need oxygen is because they use the oxygen to synthesize sterols in order to be able to make the cell wall. It makes no difference whatsoever whether the yeast is dry or wet. They still need to make the cell walls when they bud. So regardless of whether or not you're using a dry yeast or a wet yeast, the requirements of the organism are exactly the same. Now, take into account those dry yeast have got to rehydrate, restart all their cell processes, then begin to ferment. They're going to need oxygen.
Okay, so just to interject, question.
Well, hold on.
Why have Safale and I believe maybe some other dry yeast producers changed their guidance as far as aerating the wort to say that you don't need to?
Unless there is another ingredient within dry yeast that means you don't need to aerate because there's something else in there. And
so as far as my understanding of it goes, I don't know if this is what Andy was trying to say as well, but the number of yeast cells or the yeast is dried at the point where it's already gone through that process where it needs
that's
oxygen. Crap. I'm just trying to very badly explain the justification for it that I've heard elsewhere.
I mean, I'll always try and aerate my wort
Yeah, I mean, just
Is that what we're
to,
saying? Are we saying
put that
to
in
do
context,
it
I
and
aerate
not
my
do it?
work regardless of whether it's dry yeast or wet yeast. I do it for everything.
Is
So.
is the myth that you don't need to aerate your wort if you're using dry yeast or
Yeah.
wet?
That is the myth. Now,
Right, okay.
so
This is a controversial one though, because this is literally like the commercial company that makes it saying you don't have to.
well, let me explain this to you, okay? When you add dry yeast,
Or is the myth that you need it to be aerated as much as people think, and it's not actually
that may be the myth. However, if you add a single packet of dried yeast, which is the recommended pitch rate, to a beer, at the end of that fermentation, is there only that amount of yeast left?
See, that is what confused me about it, because when they were saying like it's already gone through the budding phase, it's like, yeah, but it regenerates and rebuds and goes through several cycles of producing more yeast cells.
Exactly. So you're
therefore,
telling me that you simply put one pack of dried yeast into a beer and it doesn't bud? That there's no proliferation phase whatsoever? That's horseshit. Now, it may be that there is sufficient oxygen within your beer for a dried yeast to mean that you don't need to oxygenate the wort. But you tell me someone other than these Lodo peeps who doesn't have a bit of foam on the top of their beer, on top of their wort when they've transferred it from the kettle to the fermenter.
It's interesting you say this, Chris, because I've started just I was through the top of the unitank, and what I found was the amount of foam that I was getting was starting to, I actually couldn't fill the unitank because the foam was coming at the top and it was making the right mess. And what I'd started doing is actually filling from one of the tri-clamps, just putting the hose straight on and then filling it up the way, because I was just getting too much foam. And it was for the Sierra Nevada clone that I had USO5, and I just sprinkled it on, or sprinkled it. It was like, because I've got tons of the sucker. But yeah,
I just like to point out, Richie Brooks, I'm not even gonna bother answering that question. You can think about that one yourself. I will, but I understand what you're saying, but any agitation of liquid, any ripples on the surface, dissolves oxygen into that beer. So it might be that with the dried yeast, with the amount that you're pitching, it might be that aeration is not as vital. And it depends what they mean by aeration. Do they mean whipping it up into a froth with a whisk? Do they mean literally injecting pure oxygen into it? Because some people do that.
Impies, I think it becomes a problem when you get to the imperial stouts, does it not?
Oh, absolutely. Aeration of wort is a big thing with impy stouts. There are some people who inject another layer of oxygen halfway through in order to rouse the
when
yeast.
you're dealing with a beer of that high gravity, the yeast needs every little bit of help that you can give it, and that's where the extra.
I mean, let's call it what it is, Tricky. Those yeast are pissed at 7%. Right? They need fucking
they're struggling.
Up as well.
They're stumbling towards the kebab shop at the end of the night.
Yeah, exactly. A shot of O2 is the bacon and eggs in the morning for those boys. So, but I don't understand. I cannot get my head around how this would actually work. How do dry yeast not need oxygen, but wet yeast do?
Is it not get injected with oxygen?
It's oxygen. Oxygen's oxygen. However you get it. And until such time as though yeast are rehydrated and have sunk or floated on the top as a krausen, they're not technically reanimated. So they're going to need the oxygen at the point at which they bud. I don't get that one at all. I've done a lot of reading on this because I do a lot of reading when it comes to the notes, especially when it's something that may be scientific in its background.
Yeah.
And I can't see any difference. both types of yeast are going to need oxygen. It may simply be a pitch rate thing that they're going to need less oxygen because there's so many more of them. But other than that, I can't understand it.
Yeah. Okay.
Makes no sense to me. So I'm not necessarily going to bust it, but I will say it does smell a bit fishy.
Yeah. A bit olive oily.
Oh, don't get me started on this one. I need to open up my other notes. Where's my other notes?
And handing straight over to Chris on this one, the olive oil myth.
Right, hang on. So the olive oil myth. So the myth is that you can use olive oil, add it to a beer in lieu of oxygen to provide the beer with a source of nutrients to promote cell wall growth during the budding/propagation/proliferation phase. The reality of this is no. However, there is a very real process within brewing that will benefit from it, and I'll get onto that. So, a little bit of background, because I love background, because it involved reading a research paper. So, there was a gentleman called Grady Hull who worked for a company called New Belgium Brewing, and he wrote about the use of olive oil to provide a source of sterols, which are just fatty acids, slightly modified fatty acid, but still fatty acids that are required for the building of cell walls. Okay. Now, there were a lot of home brewers that jumped on this, and there's one of them in this particular group right now.
Hello.
Who jumped on it as a really easy source of materials for healthy yeast without using oxygen, which clearly oxygen is bad for beer. Okay. After a certain point, oxygen's bad for beer. So, what these people did not realize, clearly, they read the main paper, didn't read the references. Okay.
It was I'm trying to remember how it came up, but it was probably in a podcast somewhere or something.
It was on a podcast. I think it was Brewlosophy.
Possibly, yeah.
Not that they've done anything wrong. Not that they've done anything wrong, okay? I am not going to slate those guys. I have a lot of respect for those guys. But the paper itself, when you read it, it was using a literal dot of olive oil, like a dot.
Yes.
Okay. Less than a drop. And it was simply being used to stabilize the yeast when the yeast were in storage or a place where they were going to stay for a while. So like yeast brinks or storage jars or, stuff like that. And it was essentially where they're going to be in a place for a long period of time. So as far as using it in your brew, no. No, because you're not going to be mixing that beer. There is no way in which that olive oil is going to do anything other than sit on the top of the beer.
But it didn't. I didn't have head retention issues. I'm
not saying that you would. The amount that you're using is so tiny. You would have more of an issue with the hop oils. Okay? But...
So...
Hang on. Just give me a minute, because I'm trying to think of the best way to say this.
My experience of it
for
everyone.
Whilst if you are storing a yeast in a jar in a fridge for a while, it is very useful because it gives the yeast a source of sterols so that if they do any budding, that they can have the essential fatty acids for the cell wall. The reality is that whilst you're brewing during the fermentation phase, it is fucking pointless because there's already enough dissolved oxygen within the wort for the yeast to do what they need to do anyway. There we go.
Right. So I talk about my experience. So I'd got a bottom, I got the conical and I can harvest the yeast and all that sort of jazz. So I was like, this is great. That means I can take these samples of yeast off, put them in Uncle Ben's jars into my fridge, and then reuse them, and that would save me money, sort of thing, for yeast. And what I found was that when you started reusing the yeast, that yeast would get very, very tired, and you would see on the tilt graphs, between the different generations, it would get slower and slower and slower. And one of the things that actually would fix or help that yeast come back to life almost and bring it back to being a much higher performing was olive oil. Olive oil seemed to like bring the nutrients back. Whereas, if you were using a fresh packet yeast or whatever and putting olive oil, pointless. This actually seemed to, if a brew was struggling or whatever, tiny bit of olive oil, and then all of a sudden, boom, it could bring it back, sort of thing. Or where it was tired, or you could spin it back up in a stir plate. You put a little bit of olive oil in it. If it was super tired, it seemed to inject new life into that yeast.
Which is exactly what I've just said.
So there you go. That was my experience of olive oil, but that's why I was quite keen to, because I seen it. I was looking into it again recently, and they were saying it's been busted, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," because I'd still not long had been putting it in my starters and stuff that had been, reused yeast.
If you are taking yeast through any generations before you get to the point where it's in beer, yes, it is useful, because that's essentially stored yeast and it's going to require those nutrients. If you are simply looking for a cheat to make your fermentation a bit more vigorous and to avoid putting oxygen in your beer, olive oil is not the way to do it.
Exactly.
Because the amount that you need is so infinitesimally small. I mean, literally one drop is more than enough for an entire brew. So you're more likely to simply affect your head retention than you are to do anything beneficial to the yeast.
But then I have had olive oil in a beer, and I've not had head retention issues,
Andy,
which is...
Andy, I said more likely to.
More likely, I know.
So, yes, whilst, yes, it technically does work, it's more for storage of yeast than it is for the fermentation phase of the yeast. Yeah, there we go.
Cool. Super.
Is that olive oil done? Good.
That's olive oil done. Yeah.
Just Tricky never said a fucking word.
I had nothing to offer on the olive oil front.
Right. Quick piss.
No, I wouldn't have done that anyway.
Right. Let's do the next one.
We move on to, where are we? I've lost my place.
CO2 blanket.
The O2 blanket and the open lid drama. So, yeah, I mean, the CO2 blanket, first of all, I think we've talked about this so many times on the pod before. I feel like we don't really need to go into this in too much depth. But the myth is like, basically, your beer is protected by a CO2 blanket that will just sit there on top of it undisturbed. And it's like, okay. I mean, ideally, it would be Chris here shouting some sciencey stuff.
We would all be like struggling to breathe oxygen because we're all in a cloud of CO2.
Exactly. So it's basically the laws of like physics and how gas works. It's moving around all the time, and it doesn't just settle down, even if technically it's a heavier molecule or whatever. Because gas by its nature is quite an excited element, not an element, but molecule or whatever that's floating around. So essentially, like when your fermentation bucket fills up with CO2, yes, it's protected by the CO2 that's sat in there, but as soon as you sort of disturb that, then the gas is going to mix up and move around and all the rest of it. So the CO2 blanket thing is bullshit, essentially, in terms of it just being static and sitting there, which kind of leads us on to the open lid drama. So let's just put this in context. Like, opening the lid is not going to instantly destroy your beer, but you are potentially going to introduce oxygen by mixing air into that CO2 that has maybe sort of filled up the headspace in your fermenter. More importantly, I think you are literally opening the lid or the door to potential contamination. So, it's not saying like, if you open the lid, your beer is instantly destroyed. It's just saying don't open the lid unless you have to. Like, obviously,
Tricky used to. I always remember used to have the blooming, the containers with the cling
boxes.
film, the boxes and all that sort of thing.
I mean, that was, for all intents and purposes, kind of open fermentation because they weren't fully sealed ever.
Yep.
And admittedly, I did have a few issues
Okay.
with
But there's certain
with a
styles
bit
of
of
beer.
infection.
Yeah, but certain styles of beer, it doesn't.
Skank Wrangler.
It doesn't affect. Some of them are more hardy than others, and I think it's only been in the last, I don't know, 4 years or whatever, or 3-4 years that we've been talking about this because of the NEPAs. With those adjuncts that just react to oxygen even more so and cause
Yeah.
that sort of not great.
Yeah. So I mean there's a really good point raised there in terms of like there's certain beer styles that are traditionally fermented open anyway. There's lots of professional breweries that will do some elements of open fermentation, but that's also where a bit of a myth kind of comes in as far as like,
Yeah.
okay, you can open ferment your beers, no problem. People don't factor into that like breweries that are doing that is during the very active phase of fermentation where it is not protected by a CO2 blanket, but protected by a blanket of yeast, usually on top. So fermenting yeast on the top of it. And then it's transferred like as early as possible into a some sort of bright tank or sealed
Is there any
secondary chamber.
Is there any open fermentation lager breweries?
Well, I think that
Sam Smith's.
lager, that famous Sam Smith's lager brewery.
But that's a question for
no,
maybe...
there is. I'm sure that I can't believe I've forgotten the name of it, but the most famous Czech Pilsner,
Urkel.
Urkel, yeah, Pilsner Urkel. I'm sure they do some element of open fermentation in their brewery.
But then you're also getting a lot of CO2 coming off. So you talked about the blanket of yeast, but then there's a lot of CO2 as well coming off when you're fermenting.
But that's what, I think that's what we're saying. Like active fermentation, then that's a different story.
There's a blanket
on the homebrew scale. Again, it comes back to like this. There's a difference here between sort of like professional brewery and homebrew scale. Professional brewery might be doing open fermentation in a very sanitary sort of like room or environment, or not. They might be actually deliberately trying to introduce some.
They're definitely not most
some
of
their house organisms, so to speak. But like if you're brewing in a shed or a garage or whatever, it's not like somewhere where you're necessarily wanting to introduce the the natural bacteria that's floating around in those environments into your beer. So
just on that particular point, can anybody put their hand up if they happen to brew in an operating theatre? Nope, nobody. Right. So
see my garage.
Can we just cover this CO2 blanket in one simple way?
It's bullshit.
Can I introduce you all to the particle theory? Okay. No. So a solid is a rigid layer of particles.
Do we have to?
Yes. We fucking do. Right?
Yeah, we go get another beer.
Go and have a beer, have a piss, have a shit, do whatever you need to do.
I'll wait for a piss.
Yeah, good sleep. So the particle theory is very, very simple. Solids are a rigid mass of interlinked particles which simply vibrate. Liquids can flow over one another, but they do not break the surface, and they take the shape of the container that they are in. Gases literally change the shape of the container that they're in. They are the second highest energy particles. They bounce around. And your entire CO2 fucking blanket theory, right, is completely blown out of the water by the fact that we're all alive. Because if there was a blanket,
I think we did this
CO2,
already.
we'd be dead. Fucking Luddites.
Anyway, moving on.
Next one's a good day.
Yeah.
Really, did I just get told to shut the fuck up?
Yes.
Okay.
We just kind of covered it. That's all.
I was having a piss.
The next myth brought to you directly from HB UK.
Yeah.
So if you've got an infected beer, just siphon off from underneath the dead badger skin or pelt that you've got on top of the beer, and
it'll be fine.
And it'll be fine.
I'm going to use that from now on. It's no longer a skin; it's a pelt.
Yeah, you've got a pelt of badger on there.
There's a pelt on my cider.
this is one of those where it's like, yeah, you might get something that's drinkable out of it, but like, if your beer
Why?
is infected, why are you then trying to like pass that infection all the way down the line to all your siphoning gear, all your bottling gear? And this is like, I don't think people even think about this beyond the point of like,
Your kegging gear
okay, maybe the beer might be fucked. It's like the beer is kind of irrelevant for me. It's like, well, you're putting this
into your system.
infection in contact with everything in your system if you then just carry on as if nothing has happened.
Yeah.
If you've got a wild yeast in there and it's something that's like what's the term they say, like an STA positive yeast, or like basically one of these like furious fermenting yeast that will just ferment the fuck out of everything basically. I've spoken to professional brewers who are like, we won't even have those yeasts in our brew house because once they're in,
Can't get
they're
rid of the
really hard
fuckers.
to get out of, and you'll just basically end up with bottle bombs. You know, like if you're in their case, if they're canning beers or putting them into even like kegs or anything like that, you can have basically explosive beers coming out of that as well.
Just burn the brewery.
And this is, you know, that's like the potential upshot of that. Like, oh fuck it, just siphon it off and, you know, whatever. It's like, okay, is it really worth that much to you that one batch of beer is going to be packaged up, or should you just fucking bin it and make another one?
Yeah, the other one, if you've seen Clawhammer Supply, their videos, if you ever look at the buckets, it's like it's the not, you know, non-log beer bucket or whatever, or non-infected bucket, because they've had a serious fucking issue because they did that log beer, you know, they put the log in, fermented it, and that suckers went infected everything by the looks of it, and they just get that. I think it was some weird woody taste that comes off that you're like, oh, that's definitely the log beer infection sort of thing.
Well, there's a gentleman in chat at the moment called Richie Brooks who reckons that the book How to Brew suggests that you can siphon from under the pellicle, and apparently that's okay to do.
There you go. How to brew.
It's in How to Brew, so clearly it must be
John
true.
Palmer or something. Don't know.
I personally would not siphon anything from underneath the pellicle because A, I don't use a fucking siphon, and secondly, that shit is infected.
But then we're not like super sour guys, you know. We're not like Milk the Funk sort of dudes, are we?
Oh yeah, obviously, again, context. Like if you're actually brewing something that's supposed to be funky.
This is why I will never siphon from under a pellicle.
Oh, you've still got a bottle of that. I've still got a bottle of that in the garage as well.
From under a pellicle.
That's the.
Has yours still got the nice chunks in the bottom of it?
Oh,
Chris?
mate, can you see the chunky bits?
Yeah, it's lumpy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's lumpy beer.
That was some nasty shit.
Just no.
Anyway, I think we've kind of done that, haven't we? We've covered.
Can we leave that one alone and move on?
Yep.
Okay, so now we're into the liquid yeast better than dry or vice versa.
No.
Again, just one that we've visited before. Yeast is yeast. I think given the same conditions, the same yeast count, all that sort of shit, liquid versus dry, there's no inherent advantage between the two, would be fair to say. There are obviously pros and cons of dry versus liquid yeast in terms of usability, ease, pitching, and all the rest of it. Go on, Andy.
USO5 versus what is it, WLP001 or whatever. Say you've got the wet yeast and then you've got a dry version. I've had things like Sanders is meant to be verdant, but I've had the Amiga. I don't know what the version is. If it's
Sanders is not verdant. That's Vermont.
No. I know, but what I'm saying is, you get the dry version and you get the wet.
Yeah.
You try them and they're like different yeasts almost.
Oh, I think there's loads of examples. I mean, I think first of all, obviously, they're different yeast manufacturers are taking different isolates of the yeast, which may be subtly or more obviously different anyway in the first place. And then also just over time, like their version of it probably becomes more divergent from the original source material, perhaps to an extent. But like that example, USO5 versus California ale yeast. I think it's pretty well established that actually, if you do a side by side, they're pretty obviously different, like
Right,
flavor
okay.
wise, because the
Are they both Chico?
well, that's the sort of assumed source for both of them, but a lot of people say that actually they're not, you know. From what I understand, I think a lot of people say that the liquid California Ale one is actually closer to like
USO
the
5.
source material than USO5 is. Yeah. So anyway, but yeah. So people talk about equivalent yeast a lot. I don't think they're necessarily equivalent, especially between the dry and liquid versions of supposedly the same thing. But anyway, so where was I? So I was saying, like, yeah, essentially, like liquid versus dry, there's no inherent like benefit either way. The yeast is yeast, sort of thing. But what we can say is, there's some advantages, obviously, to using dry
Packaging.
yeast in terms of usability. Like you can just throw it straight
Use
in
by.
there. Yeah, last longer. Exactly. No need to make starters, generally speaking. So easier to use, but then the offset of that for me, especially, is the lack of variety in terms of
That's
dry
getting
yeast,
better now.
which is
That's getting a
improving
lot
massively.
better
Yeah,
now.
100%.
In the last 2 years, I mean, how many new yeasts have we had recently? Quite a
Oh,
lot.
like the amount of choice in terms of dried yeast is
It's boomed.
fantastic nowadays. It's definitely exploded. But I think the example that I always like to use for this is like English ale yeast, especially. If you look at like the amount of different English ale yeasts that are available in liquid format versus dry format,
Oh,
it's like, you know, okay, so
massive.
you've basically got like a sort of standard SO4 or Nottingham, maybe like I think there's equivalents of like the Fuller's yeast in dry format, and maybe a couple of others, but liquid form, there must be, what, I don't know, dozens of them,
Yes.
at least. So it's a question of choice for me. And the other, I guess, the other advantage with liquid yeast, you kind of have, it's sort of an advantage and a disadvantage. You have a bit more control over like pitching rate and stuff like that, so you can
Build it up to what
basically
you need.
build the starter to your specific needs. And in some cases, although dry yeast appears on the face of it to be cheaper, actually liquid yeast, if you're reusing it and
Yeah.
you're sort of farming it yourself and building up starters, in the long run can actually work out cheaper if you
It's the
maintain
cost of
your own.
it's the cost of DME, isn't it?
Exactly, yeah. So so for me, like, I've got loads of stuff on slant. If I was buying all of those yeasts fresh in liquid form or even in dried form, to be fair, I'd be spending a hell of a lot more on yeast than I am spending on like 100, 200 grams of DME each time I want to make a starter. So basically, I guess what we're saying is, like, there's no definitive like one is better than the other. There's just pros and cons of each, and depending on what you're brewing, dry or liquid yeast might be a more appropriate choice, I suppose.
Yeah, and if you like USO5, then you can buy it in brick form, which does make it cheaper.
Wow.
There you go. Top tip.
Okay. I think, is that liquid versus dry done? Are we good with that?
Please leave that one alone. Yeah, it's done.
Okay, secondary FV.
No.
Just
No.
No.
Let's move on.
Yeah, next one.
A particularly good question that was sent in by Graham Hughes was, is yeast nutrient just dead cells, and do you need it?
Yeah.
The answer is yes to both, but at the same time, it also contains other things. Now, I did a fair bit of research on this one because I was quite interested to find out exactly what it contains. And it contains something called diammonium phosphate.
Chris, what brand?
All of them.
Okay.
So diammonium phosphate, which is a salt, not salt, but a salt, which provides a really good source of free amino nitrogen. And it's the main ingredient in most yeast nutrient blends, weirdly enough. And it's vital, absolutely critical for yeast health. However, in most cases, most malt that you're going to use has a massive amount of fan in it as well. So realistically speaking, do you need it? Probably not. Now, The other thing that it does contain is yeast hulls, which is the dead yeast part, which allows you to have sort of lipids, fatty acids. Again, the building blocks of new cells, because if you take dead things and eat them, then you end up with, being able to make new things, which is kind of how eating steak works. And then the other one is vitamins. It has thiamine, which is vitamin B1. It has biotin, which is a cofactor for, if I'm not entirely mistaken, carboxylase enzymes, of which I believe there are 5. And these vitamins and cofactors are really important. They allow the yeast to do things just like with us. If we're vitamin C deficient, we end up with scurvy and we die. Yeast, if they don't have the right number of vitamins and cofactors and things, then essentially you would result in a slower yeast budding process and a slower fermentation, or a hindered process. But they also contain essential metals like magnesium and zinc. And these are essentially just meant to increase yeast metabolism, cell count, that kind of thing. So the answer is it just dead yeast cells? Not completely. I'm sure most of the things that are in there come from dead yeast cells. But the reality is it a requirement? No. Will it make your fermentation better if you're reusing yeast? Yes.
Yeah. There you go.
Have I covered that one sufficiently?
That's it.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Fermentation is done. We're onto the home straight now, I think.
Let's go. The one that's going to produce the most amount of conversation.
With this next one?
I think so, yes.
Oh, it's a beauty, isn't it?
I mean, I think Andy needs to take this one. So
go on, Andy. Crack on.
The myth is home brewing saves you money. Andy, go. How much has homebrew saved you?
See, the problem is I'm one of these guys that get into a hobby and I just go deep.
Go max boost.
Max boost. You try to tell, even if you do it, like say you do the plastic bucket thing and you're doing the kits or whatever, and you're getting it cheap all grain and you're saying I'm doing this to save money. I mean, what were you drinking before? You were having a case of beer, like before I got into brewing, my alcohol intake. You could talk about how many bottles, how many cans you had or whatever in a week. That you could talk in that. I just talk in pure gallons now. It's not
18 gallons a week.
It's like you're thinking, how many gallons am I going through? And it's just a different level now where your consumption rate just goes insane because, okay, it's 40-50p for a pint of whatever, but you're drinking so much of it that you're not saving money. I'll tell you that. That's
but you
sure.
are saving money because if you're drinking the same amount of commercial.
If you were, then yeah, but before you weren't, and what homebrewing's done is turned me into a mad alky, to be honest.
Well, let's look at this from a purely
Hey, come on,
standpoint.
You're Scottish. That was par for course anyway, wasn't it?
Oh wow, a wild generalisation there.
I didn't actually drink that much. I would maybe
come on.
so Christmas would be the kicker where you would just drink loads and then maybe on holiday or whatever, and you would make nights out and stuff. But I definitely feel like I'm a professional athlete when it comes to alcohol now, where, hangovers and stuff. It's like you go on a night out and it's like, hardly any hangover. Whereas before it would have been a total game over shot,
Let's look at this from a purely craft beer standpoint, okay? Let's say you drink craft beer all the time, and I could name some people who drink craft beer all the time. You go to your local bottle shop and you're taken in by, I don't know, let's pull a beer off the top of my head.
Chris.
Putty. Okay?
Right.
So you want to drink putty. You buy yourself 6 cans of putty. It's massively gouged because it's putty. You pay, I don't know, let's think of a number off the top of our head, like somebody in our group paid 15 quid a can.
Yeah.
And you buy 6 cans of that, all of a sudden you are 90 quid in the hole.
Yeah, but I could make 5 gallons of putty. They only need to drink 6 cans of it, but I need to drink 5 gallons.
Exactly. This is my point. Okay. So whilst yes, you
they're
can
drinking
make
quality
that beer cheaper, you personally can't, because you blew how much on your brewing kit?
Well, that's the thing. So you can spend thousands of pounds on brewing kit, and it, it's great. But
It is, and it's a wonderful thing. And if that's
yeah,
the way you want to take your hobby, go for it.
but
Some
you can't go into home brewing and be like, "Oh, this is going to save me money," because
let's look at it this way. Some people, okay, they are into, let's say, I don't know, S&M. All right. One person buys a pair of handcuffs and uses the headboard of his bed. The other person goes full fucking shades of grey, okay, and converts a room in his house into a dungeon.
yes.
They're both just getting a bit of fun at the end of it. Right?
Sorry, we're talking about Stewie here.
Who's paid more? Right? I think that's a good point to look at it. And whilst, yes, homebrewing can save you money, the reality is it fucking doesn't.
No, sex dungeons. Yeah,
They're
that's another
expensive.
expensive hobby.
Apparently.
Apparently.
I'm just literally using 50 Shades of Grey as my answer to that one.
I wonder how many people got into that during lockdown.
Well, weirdly, I was reading a newspaper article and it was talking about Ann Summers and Love Honey.
Oh, Love Honey, yeah.
And apparently their sales went through the roof at the beginning of lockdown.
Yeah.
I don't know.
A lot of happy people, Chris.
I'm sure there were a lot of people. I mean, I'm pretty sure Durex's profits went up. Although, judging by the number of kids being born now, probably not. It's one of them things. You've kind of, yes, homebrewing can save you money if you get to the point where you can brew good beer and you stop. Because at that point, you are organizing a return on your investment. If you continue to buy, I don't know, let's go with unitanks and glycol chillers and, I don't know, 100-litre kettles, and then having to redo the electrics in your brewing space, I'm pretty sure that's not saving you money. I don't know anybody who's done all of those things.
You do?
Yeah, I do. but this is the point I'm trying to make. You can save money homebrewing, but only if you stop.
Yeah, but Chris, do I regret it? Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. And this is the thing. This is why people. This is why people who race cars race cars.
So I guess the conclusion is, like, if you go into it purely on the basis of saving money, theoretically it's possible.
Yes.
But it doesn't work out that way for anybody.
No. Everyone has that idea, tries to sell it. I think that's what the missus probably hears.
If you break down the raw ingredient costs, then it's like, yeah, per pint, but then you're not factoring in like all the other
you turn into mad alky.
You're not factoring in 1,200 quid for a unitank.
Exactly. The fact that you just drink way fucking more than you did before anyway.
1,200. Try inflation, Chris. I think it's up to about 14 now.
But that's because of Ukraine, isn't it?
Well, everything.
And shipping costs. Was it 28 grand now for a container?
Yeah. It's probably, I don't know what it is now. It was probably a lot more than that at one point, but
let's just say I won't be importing those dildos from China anytime soon.
What a beer.
Le Chouf.
Le Chouf.
No. Yeah, so there we go.
Now says no.
The last one on the list, and this is going to end up being quite a short podcast for us. Oh no, there's 2 more on the list.
There's 2 more.
2.
So, vacuum packing hops. Is it required or is it not?
This is a bit of a random one because it just didn't fit into the other categories. So it was like bunged on at the end.
Hey, I bought that fucker, so I'm going to use it.
Yeah, well, exactly. I've got a vacuum packer. Everything's getting vacuum packed.
I use mine for sous vide. I don't really use it for hotels. So, hops, need to be frozen to prevent the degradation. Protecting them from oxygen, according to, I can't remember who it was. I think it was on Brewlosophy, where they talked about some big hop supplier saying the most important thing is to keep them cold or frozen. And that's more important than vacuum sealing them and nitrogen flushing them and stuff.
Mine's are refrigerated.
Right?
In
But
the vacuum.
The most important thing, as far as I'm concerned, about vacuum sealing your hops is, if you're like me, it's going to stop your frozen chips tasting of fucking Amarillo. Because that is a big
or your
problem.
Amarillo tasting the frozen chips.
Exactly.
Well, there is
Goes
that.
both ways, right?
That's less of an issue. Frozen chips don't really have much of a smell. But Amarillo really has a very potent aroma. And the number of times my wife's complained that the pork chops tasted like hop. There's quite a few. Oh, mate.
Oh,
I
wow.
mean,
Yeah.
look, I think if you've literally got like your hops in open packets, there's a few other issues like frost building up on them. They're going to get maybe damp as well in the freezer.
Well, I roll mine down and put them inside a plastic bag, push the air out, and then seal
for
that
me,
bag.
like there's value to vacuum sealing them,
Yeah,
regardless of whether it's like, and all the the suppliers send them out nitrogen flushed and all this sort of stuff. So there's got to be something in it, they are going to oxidize, aren't they?
Yeah.
But that's still going to happen in the freezer if they're open and they're not vacuum sealed, right?
I don't think so at that temperature, no.
The other thing you can use your vac packs for is cutting up your bricks of yeast as well, so you can repackage your yeast.
When you said cutting up, Andy, I got worried.
Buzzing out in there.
I'm like, what the fuck has Andy been cutting up? So,
Cutting up your yeast.
Can we cover the last one and give Tricky a little bit less of an editing job?
Wink, wink.
Is Andy's sofa really a Pornhub casting couch?
As far as we know, yes.
Yeah, I think
That's
it is.
Podcast done.
I think it is.
I also hope that one day it will be as well.
Oh,
Yeah.
I think it currently is, Andy. I think you're just trying to hide it.
That's how I make all my money. That's
Subscribe to High Road Hose on Pornhub.
High Road Hose.
Follow me on my Reddit as well.
Yeah.
My OnlyFans.
Absolutely. Right, gentlemen. Tricky,
Juice
there was an
69.
issue with Audacity. I've put a note.
Yeah,
at the
I've just
bottom of
seen
the
your
notes.
note at the end there. So,
Yeah, I fucked it up again. Sorry.
We'll fix it in the mix.
I'm sure you will. So that is the end of today's podcast. And I have to say, very enjoyable shouting down a few of those stupid fucking ideas that people have.
Classics.
Some of them do have a basis in truth, but the situational requirements for them is quite rigid. So that's a bit of a problem. But I'm going to stick the link for the after party into the chat. The password's a good one, guys, so I would suggest you copy and paste it. Other than that, I think it's safe to say that is episode 41 in the bag, and we can all say goodbye.
Yes,
Cool.
Thank you and good night.
Catch you later.
Yeah, don't let the door hit your asses on the way out. Take care, gents. I'll see you on episode 42.
Okay.
Oh, actually,
See you soon.
no, I won't. I won't be
Uh-oh.
on episode 42. But you three will be, won't you?
Yep.
Yeah.
Do we want
It's
to tell
gonna
them
be-
what episode 42 is?
Is this the one where we get someone that knows what they're talking about?
This is exactly what happens. I think
Cool.
I think that there is somebody coming on. I'm gonna let Andy make the posts all about that one. But you might want to watch the next one because it's going to be a good one. The only reason I'm not
midweek as well.
It's going to be a Wednesday night, and the reason why I'm not going to be there is because
birthday.
for some fucking reason Andy decided to book it on my birthday.
And then he says, "Can you move it?" I says, "Fuck off."
Exactly. So so that'll be on the 30th of March, Wednesday night. Probably kick off about 8 o'clock. Andy will put a post up. Don't miss that one because that one's going to be a good one. Other than that, take it easy, people. We will catch you soon.
Bye.
See ya.
Right, I'm going to stick some links into the old chat-a-rooney. Okay, so for those of you still on YouTube, that's the link. And the password is... And that's the password. And I'll just check. Oh, there's 3 people on Facebook, so I'm going to have to put a link there as well. So for you on Facebook, if you want to join the after party, that is the link. And the password is... There you go. Copy and paste it because you probably won't know how to spell it. Other than that, we're all golden. I'm going to shut some windows down and we'll see you all in the after party in a moment.
Cool.
Bye-bye. Bye, YouTube. Bye, Facebook.
See ya.